Welcome to the Top Order podcast. It's that time of year again. It's ICC tournament time. This time, the Men's Champion Trophy being held over a couple of venues, which we'll come into in our famous explainer. But we're going to talk the favourites, the each way bets, the outsiders, and our predictions for the tournament. All coming up on the Top Order podcast. Stay tuned. Well, boys, it is that time of year again. We've got an ICC trophy coming up, Champions Trophy, which have kind of come in sort of dribs and drabs, haven't they, over the course of the last sort of 13, 14 years. But we are going to go into, I think, a classic explainer. Then we've changed the format a little bit. We've tended to talk a little bit about each team. But what we've decided to do with this 8-team tournament is talk a little bit about the favourites, our each-way bets, and then the rank outsiders, and then predictions, and also a prediction for player of the tournament as well. So yeah, this is going to be easy. India win it, don't we? So that's the end of the Top Order podcast. We'll see you next week. But Baldy, I don't know if you do want to just sort of run through, the explainer and how we're gonna go about trying to tackle the next. I'm going to do a subliminal message. The next 45 minutes or so.
Yeah. Thank you, Binksy. Welcome to the Top Order podcast explainer for the 2025 edition of the Men's Champions Trophy. It's a 50-over tournament running from the 19th of February through to the 9th of March. 15 games over 19 days in 4 cities across Pakistan and the United Arab Emirates. Of course, UAE being hosting games in Dubai, Pakistan hosting games in Lahore, Karachi and Rawalpindi. There'll be 12 group games for 8 teams split across 2 pools each. We'll get to that later. So 12 group games there, 2 semi-finals and a final. So unfortunately for Adam, there'll be no Baconators, no Eliminators, no Dominators, no Championators, and certainly no large value combos. Now, Dubai will host potentially a semi-final and a final, depending on how the games go. Lahore will host one semi-final for sure, and may also host the final if a certain team doesn't play in that final. Let's get to the 8 teams that are going to play in this edition of the Champions Trophy. They will, of course, be Pakistan, who host the tournament officially and earn the right to play through that criteria. The other 7 teams are the next 7 highest, or the 7 highest qualifiers from the men's edition of the 2023 World Cup, which means that Sri Lanka and the Netherlands, who finished 9th and 10th in group play in that tournament, miss out. Divided into 2 groups, we have Group A, Bangladesh, India, New Zealand, and of course, Pakistan, which guarantees an India-Pakistan game in the Champions Trophy. Group B will feature Afghanistan, Australia, England, and South Africa, the so-called Group of Death, or that's at least the Group of Death that I'm calling it. So each team will play each other once. There'll be 3 pool games for each team. Top 2 teams go through to the semi-finals, and then, of course, the winners of the semi-final play in the final. And there you have it, lads. There's your explainer. Now, I do have some odds if we would like to run through those now. Otherwise, we can run through them as we introduce sort of each team in their relevant tiers. What say you, Binksy?
I've got the odds as well. So let's do that as we run through. So, I think we've got the Bet365 odds. Other bookmakers, of course, are available. So please check the terms and conditions below. But let's start with a favourite, shall we? And we think that this is a bracket that includes, well, we know that it's a bracket that includes India. And I think because we've called it favourites, we need to add another team in. And that's probably Australia, isn't it? But there's a distance between them if we look at the way India is shaping up. So should we talk a little bit about that group first? And I might actually throw back to the studio here, because I've got to admit, we haven't had massive conversations about spinners for a while. I don't know if you've been feeling okay, Stu, but yeah, we haven't been talking a massive amount of spin. But this Indian squad, packed with spinners, and probably the absence of what you'd see as a genuine spare batter. So as we look at their squad and their favourites tag at 2.75, you call it $2.75. Down in that part of the world, but yeah, 275 the odds for India. What are your thoughts on them in this bracket first and foremost, and then maybe Baldy, how big is that gulf to Australia? In that bracket as well.
Yeah, I mean, on sort of how you've tiered it, I think the fact that, like you said, when I look at those odds, it is very interesting to me that Australia is the one that they've separated out. I think that's probably historical. We'll come to whether we think that's justified in a minute. But I do think, as much as, I always into these tournaments, you look at form, right? You try and figure out what's going on, who's playing best and all that kind of stuff. But you try and dig into the ODI form since that 2023 World Cup that you're talking about, and it's pretty patchy. I mean, the team that's actually got the best record since then is Sri Lanka. They've played 23 games and won 15 of them, I think. Every other team. India's played 6 ODIs since the 1st of January 2024. And so on that note, you think, well, how good a form are they actually in ODIs? But then you think, okay, well, let's look at their white ball form in general. And as much as we've talked in depth, through that Baldy Trophy about how, the struggles that they've had in Test cricket, that we thought, they've obviously lost 3-0 to New Zealand. They struggled in that Baldy apart from that one game. So you think that there's holes there, but the way they dispatched England, the way their lineup, their actual team lines up and the players that they can afford to leave out, it's pretty staggering. And I think when you put all of those together, yeah, definitely in the favourites camp for me. And spin is a big factor of that. I don't know. Do we want to talk about the squad balance, like Binksy said? Because I've just kind of rambled on about favouritism. But, I did think it was interesting, the players that, someone like Jaiswal's not in the squad, whereas we've got, about 15 spinners in the squad, which do they even need those? Because they've got Akshar Patel, Ravi Jadeja, who are going to be locked in pretty much every game. And the way they played against England, both, brilliant contributors and going to be a valuable part of every single game that they play.
I think the question becomes, will we expect India to see 35 to 40 overs of spin across their group games and then semi-final and the final? Look, India are going to play all their games in the UAE. So they've got to pick a balanced squad, I think. They're going to bowl a lot of spin, but are they going to bowl 40 overs of spin and pick 4 spinners? That's the kind of crux of the issue that we're dealing with here. I think if you have a look at the way their side's been stacking up lately, you've got kind of 3 all-rounders at 6, 7 and 8 in some order, or 5, 7 and 8, depending on where they bat.
It's so huge, isn't it? Like, if you look at all the other teams, it's really hard to find those all-round spots aren't always obvious and who's fitting in all of them. And in India just goes 7, and even Akshar's been going up to 5 whenever they need them to.
Absolutely. So I think they have gone one too many spin bowlers in their squad. I like the fact that they've got Kuldeep in there. I know that CV Varun has had a great recent run of form, and he's deserving of a spot, you could say. But I do think they've got one too many spin bowlers in that squad, and maybe they could have had another spare batter, as Binksy has suggested.
Is it going to matter, though, Jamie? I mean, let's bring you in here. You've just seen India firsthand going through in this India-England series. You've watched them very closely and how they've played against England. And, yeah, I mean, is it even going to matter if they bring their A game? You mentioned all the different strengths that they have.
Yeah, probably one of the things is, is pitch conditions of the UAE. Like, what is that going to be? Is it going to be a little bit, is it going to be flatter? Is it going to turn? Yeah, I think that could come into it. I think Axar and Dejada, definitely look world beaters, don't they, in terms of that spinning department. I think they've still got some questions around maybe perhaps the top order a little bit. What does that look like? We mentioned earlier in the week around, Rohit coming into form and looking dangerous again. But they do look a powerhouse even without Bumrah. And I think there's probably just some decisions to make regarding, as what you're saying, Baldy, around how many spinners they actually go with, and maybe they'll know a little bit more after that first match in the UAE, knowing what the conditions are likely to be like. I think from previous tournaments out there, the outfields tend to be pretty lush, don't they? So that could be a factor in terms of team selection. But yeah,
I think that the other factor for me, and I think it's the same for all of the teams, is this is a really, really short tournament, isn't it? There's a maximum of 5 games in the tournament over I can't remember the dates exactly, Baldy, but a couple of weeks essentially. So I think what India have done, and I think what other teams have done, the only question mark I have is we've seen, I think, a trend for one-day cricket, so 50-over cricket, to be a lot closer probably to the T20 game than it has been historically. And what I mean by that is teams do now know that they can go harder for a lot longer. So I think in the olden days, you used to always need that insurance policy of, a Michael Bevan or, someone like that batted at 6 or 7 who could, get you out of the poo if you found yourself, 30 for 4. Whereas now I think that all the teams sort of back themselves not to be in that position too often. So it tends to be that the bowlers are the sort of the trump card, the extra option. And maybe because it's just a couple of weeks, they've gone, well, Varun Chakravarti could come in and do a job if we end up playing on Adbunson at some point, or the wickets in Dubai deteriorate a little bit over the course of the tournament. We've seen what Kuldeep can do as well. So I think maybe they've kind of just, got those guys in the squad. It's a shame, for them that they don't have Bumrah, because he's the other absolute gun in that sort of can win you a game in 5 minutes with the ball category. His injury must be, one that, they didn't think was going to come right, because I'd have kept him in the squad, even if he was only going to be kind of getting fit towards the semis in the final, to be honest. I'd have gone, well, we'll get, we back ourselves to get through. And then, the final component of that, of course, is it's being played pretty close to India. And pretty close to a major hub where you can get players in and out of. So I think replacements are going to be a little bit easier to do than if this was, down in Australia or New Zealand and you've got a, 24-hour flight to get players in. But yeah, look, they look every bit the value of their $2.75 when someone like Rishabh Pant can't get a game. And he's ostensibly there, isn't he, as the spare batter, probably, you would say, in that squad. But wow, that is, we've talked about this embarrassment of riches. That is an embarrassment of riches. And just, on KL Rahul, I thought he kept pretty well through that in England-India series. Not to mention his batting as well. So, even when you're clamouring to get someone like Rishabh Pant into the team, KL Rahul did a fantastic job in that series, particularly now as someone has found him some long sleeves to keep wicketing.
Look, India, class outfit. You look up and down that lineup. So, I mean, I think what's been huge for them in that England series is the fact that Shubman Gill has really, really looked, all class, because, you guys are talking about the pitches. We obviously haven't seen in Dubai, but what we've seen from this tri-series in Pakistan, if they're going to be anything like that, they're very flat. The wickets they're very flat, but they're sort of a bit tacky and a bit slow at times. So I think what that's shown in this series is that if you get in, you can absolutely cash in. And most teams so far have been, at least in that series, have been going, okay, well, we can get whatever we want in this final 10, 15 overs. All we have to do is build a partnership, and then anything goes really from then. And that'll be a change a little bit for some teams like maybe Australia, like Travis Head, and someone like, Rohit, who, just has been going hard and trying to get it early, because I do think early wickets will be really important in that sense. But, again, if you can get off to, like India and even England were doing in that series, if they can get off to 80 or 90 on that first 10 overs, and then you can still go hard at the end, they're going to be, we could be looking at some massive scores again.
But Baldy, I want to talk about Australia next, your home nation. So Lippy just mentioned Travis Head there, who, look, is one of the form players at the moment in world cricket, isn't it, across all three formats. You were always very coy about your chances in these tournaments, and I think we often sort of see Australia doing something really, really weird in the build-up and changing the whole way that they play just before the tournament. They don't have a 4-year build-in. You're going to have a 4-day build-in, really, to losing 3 seamers, aren't you? Mitchell Starc, the latest to pull out of the tournament, following Hazlewood and Pat Cummins as well. So you've kind of lost that trio that are talked about as a trio, aren't they? Starc, Hazlewood and Cummins. And then probably some questions as well around that all-rounder spot as well, with no Mitch Marsh and the retired Marcus Stoinis as well. So how confident are you that Australia can do another Australia and peak in time for a major tournament? And they are, in terms of the odds, just as we said we would do throughout the course of the podcast. India $2.75, Australia at $4.50. So certainly a little bit of a spread there.
Yeah, Australia are certainly nowhere near India in terms of bookmaker favouritism, and I think if you have a look at the loss of all of the household names in that Australian setup, the previous sort of track record of having patchy form and not knowing who their best side is and not having great results coming into a major tournament doesn't follow the same trajectory this time around, because you don't have Starc, Hazlewood, Cummins, Marsh, Stoinis to come into the side to bolster the team, bring them all together and provide a bowling attack that could bowl sides out and can contain sides on a regular basis. So losing those household names, they're replaced by Nathan Ellis, who is a very, very serviceable white ball cricketer, but he's certainly not in the class of Starc, Cummins, Hazlewood. And then you've got some relatively unknown players. Spencer Johnson is a relatively unknown player, even though he's sort of 29 now. And Ben Dwarshuis as well, who's been around the BBL for a long time, but hasn't really represented Australia all that much. And then you've got Sean Abbott, Aaron Hardy as all-rounders coming in for Marsh and Stoinis, and they're completely different players. Neither of those are necessarily top-order batters. They're more sort of bowling all-rounders, I think you would probably be fair to say, particularly in Abbott's case. So they're not providing the same punch into that Australian team as we've seen from guys in the past. What you're now left with is a lot of responsibility falling on the shoulders of guys like Steve Smith, who's now our captain for the tournament, Travis Head at the top of the order, and potentially Glenn Maxwell as well in that all-rounder spot at 5, 6, 7, wherever he bats, to score a lot of runs. Because outside of that, the form is very, very patchy, particularly in the top order. And if you'll let me rant for another couple of minutes, I just want to touch on the form of Short and Jake Fraser-McGurk in particular, because those are the guys I think that are really under a lot of pressure to stand up in this tournament and make big match-winning contributions at number 1 and number 3 potentially, to steer Australia into winning positions. Because what I've seen in the last 4 games that Australia have played, 2 heavy losses to Pakistan by 9 wickets and 8 wickets respectively. No, and then subsequently we've been pumped by Sri Lanka, who aren't even at the tournament, as you've said. So in previous iterations of these big tournaments, Australia's form's been patchy, but you've always had that confidence that they'll come together and go on a run. This tournament is so short that there's no real time to lose a game in the group stage. You lose an important group stage game to England, Afghanistan or South Africa, and that could be you on the plane home. So there's no margin for error in this Australian side, and I just don't see a nucleus of players that are as reliable as we've seen from guys in the past. And I have them, and I know I keep, as the case of the boy who cried form on the Top Order podcast, but I actually have England and South Africa and potentially even Afghanistan right up there with Australia in terms of their chances to get out of the group, and some of those sides even slightly ahead. Of course you do. Yeah.
Look, can I jump in? Because I actually stand with you in this case, because I look at that, the way Australia's been playing, the way that the amount of quality players that they are missing. I think this would be, you've talked before about the build-up going wrong and then suddenly they come out and win. I think this would be the most remarkable of them all. And I think that the fact that they are still favourites is a historical. They won the 2023 World Cup. They were, they historically are awesome at cricket. But you look at the actual players on this list, I don't see how they are separated from that huge bunch that is sort of the next cabs off the rank that we'll probably talk about in a minute, that are, anyone else other than India, basically. I don't see how they've separated themselves. And what, I mean, let's stay with you, because this is, Australia is your team here. How does it go well for them? Let's say glass half full. Yep. Like what because I don't know. I can't picture it in my head on how they could win this tournament, really.
Their batters are going to have to score a lot of runs, and it's going to have to be Short, Fraser-McGurk, Inglis and Carey are going to all have to step up at some point, because Head and Smith and Maxwell can't score all their runs in 4 or 5 games on the bounce. Those other guys are going to all step up and all make big contributions. And look, quite frankly, Matthew Short and Jake Fraser-McGurk are impact players, but they are going to have to rein in their shot selection, and they're going to have to get Australia 15 to 20 overs into their batting innings rather than go hammer and tongs at the top of the order and be out in the first 5 or 6 overs, both of them, the pair of them. Yeah. I've seen Australia 3 for spit a lot recently in ODI cricket in terms of the results that they're having, and it's not a formula to beat South Africa, who've got a vaunted middle order. England have got a dynamic middle order, and if you have a look at the danger that Ibrahim and Gerbutz pose at the top of the order for Afghanistan, you know, those are dangerous batting lineups. And if we get outpointed at the top of the order, we are not going to get out of the group stage, and that's the thing that really concerns me. I don't actually, as much as we lose a lot of guys from the bowling perspective, I think we've still got some really skillful bowlers, right? Adam Zampa is going to be very, very important in Pakistan. Glenn Maxwell is a cricketer who's played a lot in Asia and who knows how to bowl in those conditions. You know, you've got Aaron Hardy, who's had some good results. Those guys are good cricketers. I think our 5th bowling option is going to be a problem, and I think our batting is going to be a problem if Travis Head, Steve Smith and Maxwell don't make a bucket of runs.
Yeah.
I would can I just come in, because I think the betting reflects the legacy of them being, as exactly as Stu says, it's a legacy favouritism. I think I think, you know, not wanting to dampen the fire, but you know, there's a lot of onus on Smith and Head to score runs, and if those guys don't, then that's putting a lot of pressure on some relatively inexperienced. My concern as well would also be, does that bowling attack have enough to not necessarily take wickets, but to contain or to take wickets at the top end? You know, if they are kind of, you've really got to seize the new ball and take wickets in that kind of early phase. Does it have that, you know, when you've got Starc and Cummins, etc., you know, it does have that edge, it does have that bite. You know, my concern would be that maybe there's just too much onus on players that, let's be honest, you know, Smith, you know, three or 4 months ago, we were talking about kind of, you know, in the twilight of his career, and you know, would he how many tournaments had he got left? He's only just hit recent form again, so yeah, I kind of, yeah, I'm not quite sure that they're as close as what we think they are to that favourite.
Yeah, I think just a couple of things on Australia from my perspective. Steve Smith as captain, I think that's put a spring in his step. Obviously, skippering in Pat Cummins' absence, the Test team and now the One Day team. You know, I think that's given him that rejuvenation. I'm really, really excited to see Spencer Johnson and Ben Dwarshuis as well. Down in, you know, the part of the world I was in until very, very recently, we got to see a lot of Big Bash, and that's really where both those guys have made their name. So I'd really like to see if they can translate that, particularly Spencer Johnson and his pace, because he does bowl Baldy. You know, home speed guns in that Big Bash, of course, they turn him up a little bit, but he's in the top 140s and into the 150s as well. But yeah, I think it's going to be that batting piece for Australia more than anything. If I look at that, you know, you go onto the quick info list of the squad where that, you know, they categorise it into batters, all rounders, and then bowlers. You know, the second listed batter is Alex Carey. You know, after Steve Smith. Okay, they're not in order of potency or world ranking, but when you used to look at that list and it would read Hayden and Ponting and all these guys, it doesn't have that kind of ring to it that it used to leading into tournaments, even if we go back to, you know, to recent editions of white ball stuff for Australia. But I still think they are the second money favourite at the moment. Yeah, and Jamie, I think you're dead right. It's that legacy piece. It's that ability to bring themselves into tournaments that they seem to sort of have in the DNA, which is bloody disappointing.
It is, and maybe if you're just setting Australia up, though, you know, they're always dangerous, and I think, given the amount of injuries and changes, it almost becomes, dare I say, a bit of a free hit for the players coming in. So if you were setting that up, you would kind of be like, okay, like, just go out there. You know, this is an opportunity to express yourself. Like, we're under the pump because we've lost players. It's not maybe our preferred sort of team, but you know, just got to go out there and express yourself and really try and display your skills. There's no consequence here. So yeah.
Right, there you go. It's definitely going to be an India-Australia final, is what we're saying, and then it's in the lap of the gods after that. Let's look at the second group that we've got here, which is we've categorised it as the each way bets, and we've got South Africa at $7.50, England at $7, and Pakistan at $8, and then we've got New Zealand at $8.50. In that group. As we mentioned, these were Bet365 odds from a couple of days ago. So, yeah, if you want to go in the comments and tell us that they've changed, thank you very much. But yeah, these are a couple of days, old. And I have to say, I think they might have even been from before Mitchell Starc withdrew. So Australia's might have drifted out a little bit. But let's just recap that very quickly. South Africa, England, Pakistan, and New Zealand in that bracket, all ranging from between $7 and $8.50. Let's start actually with New Zealand, Stu, and I want to frame this in two ways. Clearly, you can talk a little bit about the makeup of the squad and the team from a New Zealand perspective. I do want to just mention one of the things that has caught the eye in the media, and that is India, for reasons that we know very, very well, are playing all of their games in Dubai, so that they check themselves into the Hilton Burj Khalifa or whatever it's called. They've got their surroundings guaranteed for those first three games. Whereas someone like New Zealand, you've got three games at three different venues, two in Pakistan and I think one in the UAE, for your three group games. How does that sort of fare in terms of your entry into the tournament? And then, do you want to come a little bit on to, I guess, the makeup of the squad and your, what I'm going to guess are pessimistic thoughts for New Zealand coming into this tournament, because we all try and put the moz on our own country, don't we?
Well, you might be wrong about that, but to answer your first question, I don't think it's a big deal, to be honest. Certainly for New Zealand. I mean, New Zealand's just been over. They have been over in Pakistan. They played in the Tri Series, played in both Lahore and Karachi. The pitches to me looked very, very similar. Not exactly the same, but they're similar in terms of what you're going to get. If the pitches in Dubai are much the same, I don't think it's going to be a huge issue traveling around, or because you're not having to travel thousands and thousands of miles. I don't players these days, they're experienced at doing all of this. They go in the IPL, they'll do I just don't think it's a huge factor for them or for anyone really in this tournament. I don't see it being a big deal. And particularly, as I just said, for New Zealand, the fact that we've been over there, got this experience, and coming into the tournament, they couldn't be better prepared and they couldn't be in better form, I don't think, with the way that they've just played in this three-game Tri-Series. They've been absolutely brilliant in terms of their batting. Someone, or at least two people in both games, have delivered in a big score, either 100 or sort of a match-winning performance in terms of a contribution that gets them to. I think they scored 300 in the first two games. They chased down 250 very, very comfortably in that final. They've got all of the kind of, you're talking about spin before. Bracewell and Santner have been fantastic in terms of what they've been able to do. Bracewell's been coming on within the power play, picking up wickets. They've been able to bowl very, very consistently. And then you've got, O'Rourke and Henry in great form. O'Rourke was fantastic in that final. So, if you're trying to say what's the perfect build-up, it's just about being this. Probably without Rachin Ravindra getting hit in the head, that was pretty unideal if you want to, for a million different reasons. But on the plus side of that, it got Devon Conway back in the side, and he's, swung things around and turned his form around. So, even Tom Latham in that last game got 50 odd and, somewhat rebuilt his confidence, I hope. So, yeah, look, I think they've, I think they're a good chance. You couldn't be much better prepared for going into a tournament like this, where you just have to get hot for 2.5 weeks and you win.
Mate, I just got Paddy Power on the phone. They've just, after that rant, have just changed your odds. You're now drifted back into $3.50. So black caps for the cup is what you're saying, Stu.
Well, I don't know about for the Cup. Look, but I think that, that's the tricky part about a tournament like this, right? You've got 3 games and, this first game is going to be, they've got the first game of the tournament against Pakistan. You would expect it's going to be a massive occasion for Pakistan, who haven't had an ICC tournament there for a long, long time. I know they've just beaten Pakistan twice and reasonably comfortably, but there's a lot of threats in that side. You're going to want to, I would expect that crowd will be fizzing. If we think back to, I don't know, even just the T20 World Cup when Pakistan and India and stuff were playing, that the kind of crowds that we were getting in Australia for some of those games was pretty amazing. So, I would, New Zealand's going to have to come out and perform. I think the first 15 overs of that game are going to be really important, because I think if, New Zealand sets the standards that they've been doing, then they can kind of take all of that other outside stuff away and then, go about their business. And probably for New Zealand, I think ODIs is our best format, and it has been for quite a long time. If you look at this group of players, I know we obviously won the World Test Championship and, haven't quite been able to do that in any of the white ball tournaments. But T20 explosiveness is sometimes a challenge for us. And in Test cricket, there's been, various things over the past couple of years that haven't been quite at the best upper echelons for New Zealand. But 50 overs gives us the time for some of our players to get in terms of with the bat, and even with the ball for people like Santner and Bracewell to kind of work in and do a job restricting instead of being able to pick up wickets all the time.
It certainly plays to New Zealand's strengths, particularly in terms of the batting. Your engine room of Conway, Williamson, Daryl Mitchell, all great builders of innings rather than bashers of boundaries. To me, it comes down to this tournament for New Zealand will hinge entirely on the first game. They beat Pakistan, then they've got a Bangladesh banana skin game potentially, and again, it depends on how you view Bangladesh's tournament chances. But then once you're there, then you've got a free hit against India in the last pool game before you get into the semi-finals. So this first game against Pakistan, as it was in the T20 World Cup for New Zealand, is the crucial game. And the difference, as I see it, between this tournament and previously in the T20 World Cup is you guys didn't come in with great prep. You cannot be better prepared now for taking on Pakistan in the first game of the tournament. The build-up could not be any better. For both sides, really, in terms of, getting themselves up for that contest. So it's going to be an absolute cracking game, this opener. And it's only a few days away now in Karachi, day-night game, New Zealand, Pakistan. But you win that, and then you've got one foot in the door into the semi-finals, I think.
I do think there are a few selection questions that they're going to have to answer. And I think the number one is the Conway-Will Young question. And it may get answered for itself if Rachin still isn't really up to it. It sounds like it has been pretty tough for him after getting, that hit him flush in the face. It was pretty horrible. So, he's had headaches since then. The last report from Gary Stead was that he is improving. The headaches are subsiding. He is netting. So, I hope he is able to be fit and considered for that first game. But if he is and everyone is available, we talked about this last week in terms of Conway. I think Conway has a much higher ceiling. Conway's looked very, very good. And this is coming from
a higher ceiling than Rachin.
No, than Will Young. To clarify.
I was just going to have to dial Raj in then, just to set the record straight there.
No, and look, this is coming from someone who spent 5 years on this podcast talking about how good Will Young is. But I do think Conway's ceiling is higher than his, and he's looked really, really good. He's in these couple of games, but Will Young has earned that spot over the past 12 months over Devon Conway. And I think it is a tough call to say, sorry, Will, you've been great for 12 months, but now you're not going to play because of this freak injury. So that's a decision they've got to do. Yeah. And, that's what they get paid the money for, right?
Yeah, and that happens at ICC tournaments, doesn't it? You make some tough decisions on your personnel leading in if you want to give yourselves the best chance. But no, look, it's great to have someone so parochial on the pod, because I can guarantee that we're going to be doom and gloom on England, and we know that Baldy's always going to play down Australia's chances. Let's delve a bit deeper into this bracket of the. Did we call it the also rans? Or certainly
each way. The each way
bets. That's right. Sorry, my bad. Where do we want to go? Yeah, where do we want to go next? We've got South Africa, Pakistan, and England to talk about in this bracket. Should we talk?
Let's get you boys in for England. Come on, because
Okay.
I think it's time for some England chat. Because and probably the first question I have is Binksy. Jamie last week we were asking him kind of what is this England white ball team, and Jamie I think summed it up by saying he didn't really know. And so, like, do you have an answer for this? How are you viewing England's white ball side? I know it's early days in the McCullum setup, but, you know, I don't know. How are you viewing this? What are your expectations for this tournament? Do they have an identity?
Do they have an identity? I think what they've got is a changing identity, and I think you've got to look at the fact that if you listen to Kevin Peterson and you listen to Michael Vaughan and you listen to some of those pundits, the identity of this team is that it's a golf trip or it's a stag do, and I don't think that is actually true. I think what it is a really, really established superstar of English white ball cricket as captain, gelling with a guy that he knows reasonably well in Brendan McCullum as a coach. But it's clear that the identity that they want is they want this group of cricketers that are playing for England under now Brendan McCullum as the head honcho, whatever you want to call him in terms of his title, but he's red ball and white ball coach. They're trying to create the same sort of ethos across this white ball team. The difficulty that I have in trying to categorise it is what we've done with the test team makes no sense, but it's been compelling to watch. And I think all of us have kind of bought into this theory of, you know, I'm going to use the word Bazball, but we've bought into this theory of Bazball in the red ball game. In white ball, I actually think you do need a little bit more pragmatism and a little bit more planning and analysis to play the game, because in order to win, particularly in knockout tournaments, there is going to be a time where not going at breakneck speed and trying to score 744 is the way that you've got to go. You've got to assess and go, do you know what? There's a 94% chance that 280 wins us this game. Let's not take the 6% risk of trying to get to 350 in order to guarantee that we win the game. Let's take the pragmatic approach to that. And that's the bit that I'm not sure whether or not we've really got that licked in terms of the way that we look at approaching some of this cricket. And you've seen that a little bit in the results in India. Small sample size, but, you know, we've played 8 white ball games out there, albeit 5 of them T20s, and we've lost 7-1. And haven't really been at the races in any of those 50-over games, I don't think. So that for me is my worry, is that we don't have any of that muscle memory, and particularly with some of the new guys coming into the squad, we're a little bit unlucky that Jacob Bethelo, I thought, had kind of burst onto the scene. He's going to miss out. Tom Banton comes in, who's not played a lot of one-day cricket. Harry Brooks still very much finding his way in the 50-over format. Ben Duckett still finding his way in the 50-over format. Jamie Smith has been injured for a pretty decent period of time. Question marks over Jamie Overton batting at number 7. So there's a lot of questions all the way down that lineup. Before I throw to Jamie, the things that excite me, though, is we do still have, and look, this is probably a controversial comment potentially, we've got the best leg spinner in world cricket at the moment in the white ball game. Certainly, if you look at the last 5 years or so, and yeah, there's an eyebrow raise, and I don't care. So we've got a gun leg spinner. And we've got, in my view, a couple of guys that I'm really excited about in that pace bowling space. Clearly, Jofra Archer, but Gus Atkinson and Saqib Mahmood is my, sort of one to watch. I think he's been superb since he's been integrated into this side. But my view on where England are at and their odds reflect this a little bit. I think they're sitting at 8-1 or something like that, or certainly around that level. No, 7, bloody hell, sitting at $7. I just think it's a tournament too early for this team to have really forged what that what that identity is. The caveat, of course, is it's a 2-week tournament. As you were just saying, Stu, you win your first 2 games, you have a free hit game leading into the semi-finals, and then you got to win 2, and you're lifting the trophy. So anything can happen, but I think it's definitely a bridge too early for England to be in a position to challenge at the later stages of this tournament. But Jamie, I don't know whether you want to burst the bubble.
I'm getting off the fence. England win it. No.
Wow.
No.
How do that? Same question as I asked Baldy though. How does that happen? Like, what? Tell me what goes well for England in this tournament if they are to do very well and progress. Maybe all the way to the final, win the tournament.
Yeah, I'm being quite playful, but I think in answering your question, top order need to score. Score runs. We don't need to be 4 down, 3 down early. So we've got to get a decent partnership. That middle order, as we spoke about previously, we can't get bogged down. We have to rotate. We've got to be scoring at least a run of ball in those middle overs. At the very least, if you compare it with what India do, they're often at 2s, super balls in those middle over at least. So we've got to be that, and I think we need all the bowlers to contribute. So I think that those, and that's probably not unlike any team, is it really? I always think with England, we're an hour away from bombing out in 1-day stuff. We're about an hour away. We get that first power play goes wrong with 3 down. We're struggling. If we get bogged down in the middle overs, when we're bowling, if it doesn't go well in that first hour, if the opposition get off to a hit, I always think we're an hour away. But like you say, you win your first game or you lose your first game, depending, and that can be a bit of a trajectory then in terms of where your future tournament ambitions are likely to be. You win that first game, you go in with renewed confidence into game 2. You lose it, you're really up against it. Then you're basically playing 2 finals, aren't you? So yeah, I am a bit more positive because I think there's probably nothing to lose. We've, as Binksy says, we've been zip 7-1. So preparation's not been fantastic. We've got injuries. It's kind of like, but there is talent in that team. There is talent in that team.
Fantastic. 7-1. It's not been fantastic. But Baldy, I know you can't offer an impartial view of England, but
no, I can't.
But what do you think?
Well, I think England will go so far as a couple of things. One, how good they can play defence with the ball and in the field, because Brendan McCullum as a leader is not one to preach defence. He's not a Tom Thibodeau type of coach. He's more of we want to play the All-Star game and be the first team to score 200 points rather than try and defend your way to a win. Culturally, and particularly we see that more in Test cricket, right? We want to take 20 wickets, we want to score as many runs as fast as we can, and we're not really prepared to defend for long periods of time. I think England are going to have to find a way to play some defence against some very electric batting sides, particularly early on against Afghanistan and in the middle overs against South Africa. That's where I think Adil Rashid, who's the second best leg spinner in world cricket, will come into the fore. As far as batting is concerned...
After who?
Adam Zampa, who's got a better average strike rate and economy across his career.
Wow. Stats, schmats.
Yeah. Each to their own. But I agree. I think Adil Rashid actually is the key in the middle overs for England. He's got to be the one who can keep Mulder, Miller, all the South African guns quiet. He's got to be the one that keeps the middle order quiet for Afghanistan. And I think he's got to be the one that rips the heart out of Stephen Smith in the Australia game as well, which is their first game. So if those guys perform with the ball and they can hold their own, I think their batters have got enough firepower to do the job for England and get them into the semi-finals. Yeah.
Probably a good time to move on. Baldy, I really like the multi-sports reference there in terms of that articulation of England actually just needed to play some defence in white ball cricket. I think that's exactly the right way of looking at it. We've not seen it in Test cricket, but they need it if they're going to hang into the odd game, I think, and give themselves a chance, which is what Australia historically have been brilliant at doing as well. Let's move on and look at another team in this category, and we'll go to South Africa, as you just mentioned them, Baldy. We haven't talked a massive amount about South Africa on the pod over the course of the last probably 12 months or so. They've kind of gone a little bit under the radar. I think the last real conversations we had were when they were sending that second or third string test team to New Zealand as a result of the scheduling of the CA T20 or whatever it was called. But they've certainly had a little bit of form and a little bit of a resurgence. Not necessarily reflected in the betting, but they are in that group. They're at $8.50. So in this group of teams that we're going to talk about, they're the least likely to win according to Bet365. But yeah, thoughts on South Africa, captained of course by Themba Bavuma, and they've got, as you mentioned, David Miller there, a couple of guys that have really done well in the franchise world as well. So yeah, South Africa.
Look, well, yeah, I mean, they're T20 World Cup finalists, but then you look at the ODI form, they've lost 6 in a row. So you could look at that and think that's a really big problem.
Not ideal preparation is the way that you describe it, according to Jamie.
Exactly. Yeah, not ideal. But I'm quite bullish on them. I think that in terms of what you need to have a rounded team and what you kind of need for one-day cricket at the moment, I look at their lineup. They have, I feel like it's an explosive lineup with bat and ball. And I know they've just played these games in Pakistan, and the person who got the runs was Britska, who's not even in the squad. But Klaasen did as well, who is in the squad and is going to be a major factor. But they're bringing a lot of players in, and I think the way that you kind of build your side on pitches like this, it's going to be really important to be able to pick up wickets, I think, during the middle stages. I was very bullish on New Zealand. I think that's probably the one question we might have is do we have, even you're talking about defense before, I do think you're going to have to be smart in terms of how you're going to try and break partnerships, because if teams get in, then they're going to cause you a lot of problems. And for South Africa, on the bowling side, I look at that lineup and think, actually, there are a lot of guys who can break a partnership, particularly Rabada, who, the fact that he is, plays for South Africa instead of playing for one of the other, for England or Australia or India, it means he's, in my opinion, perennially underrated for just how good he is, in all forms. And so he's someone that can come in, pick up wickets. They've got Maharaj and Shamsi on the spin side that can do a job really, really nicely. And then you look at that middle order and even the top order, but the middle order is what I look at in that side and think, if Heinrich Klaasen is on 30 off 30 with 12 overs to go, look out. I don't care who you've got in your bowling lineup in terms of your death bowlers. That's going to be a big problem for you, especially if David Miller or Aiden Markram or, Ryan Rickleton or Themba Bavuma, any of these guys are at the other end. You've got a big, big problem, and you're going to be chasing a lot against a decent bowling attack. So, yeah, I think they've got a very good chance of getting through the group and then, making some serious noise in this tournament.
Throw into that Stubbs, Markram, Van der Dussen, Janssen, Vian Mulder, Corbin Bosch, who's come into the side. They have got the most dangerous middle order, I think, outside of India in this tournament. And I throw Australia, England, I throw anyone against that South African side. I think they have a much more dangerous middle order. And I think what sets South Africa apart and makes them really, really dangerous, the team I'd least likely want to face in group play if I had to get out of the group, is their 5th bowling option, and their 6th bowling option is really good. If they play Rabada and Gidi, Maharaj and Shamsi 8, 9, 10, 11, then they've got someone like they've got Janssen at 7 or Mulder or someone like that. Like, their 5th bowling option is quality. They're not bowling a guy who could go for 70 or 80 without too much risk, too much trouble. You've got to take a risk against someone in that batting lineup if you want to make big runs. And I think, oppositions will probably try and target Janssen if he plays. But, even Markram or Mulder can do a job for South Africa. And so I think that's what makes them really dangerous, particularly in pool play against England and Australia.
Yeah, Absolutely. They've got two of the best names in the tournament as well. Tony DeZorzi sounds like he's in The Sopranos, doesn't he? And I was just disappointed. I just looked up his strike rate with the bat, and it's a shame it's so low for Corbin Bosch, because that would have been much better if his strike rate had been in the 150s with a name like Corbin Bosch. How big a miss, though, is Henrik Norkia? I've been super impressed with him over the course of the last probably 24 months or so. We've got some big name fast bowlers that have pulled out of this tournament, not least the trio from Australia. But is that a massive miss when you've still got Rabada and Ngidi and some of the others that we mentioned, Marco Jansen? It seems like a big part of that South African jigsaw to me.
Maybe. I don't think it's a huge deal personally. I don't. I think they've got enough to kind of cover him, and I don't know. We've seen him. He's been brilliant at times, but he's also someone that can really go the distance if he's not getting it right. And I think in a way that might help. Someone like Ngidi maybe who might be a bit more reliable. Maybe when you've got the other explosive bowlers is quite useful. So yeah, I don't think it's a huge loss. But
he'll be missed, but I don't think he'll be the drop off between Norkia and Ngidi or Norkia and Jansen is not as significant as the drop off between Cummins and Ben Dwarshis, for example, right? So they will miss him, but the guys who are stepping into this South African side, and you have a look at the squad, 12, 13, 14 and 15, pick them out of the squad, because I think you could interchange any one of those puzzle pieces into that South African squad, and you're not really losing much in the drop off. You could argue about Bosch or DeZorzi or whatever, but they've got a really well-rounded cricket squad at the moment, and they've got enough dangerous guys that they've got all of the kind of pieces of the puzzle covered, a little bit like India.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to the hosts, Pakistan. They're sitting at $8. Thoughts on their progress through the tournament? It's going to be tough, and I guess in a way, a shame that they weren't able to host in their own right throughout the course of the tournament. I know they've done a massive amount of work over the course of the last probably 4 or 5 years, and we always refer back to this. We had a really good chat with the then managing director of Pakistan cricket, Wasim Khan, who talked about what they'd done and what they'd needed to do to get international cricket back into Pakistan. But they've certainly got some gun players. Not too long ago, they were in the final of the T20 World Cup at the MCG against England. So some recent white ball pedigree. But into the 50 over format, are they warranted being in this group of each way bets at 8-1, chaps?
I mean, they haven't been very good in this tournament, I don't think. In this whatever you want to call it, this tri-series that's essentially been a warm-up for, for this tournament. They've, like you said, I think the dangerous part about them is that they've got some incredible players in that lineup. We just saw, I suppose Salman Agha, who's been really, really good. Rizwan's been really, really good in terms of the batting. But I think the bowlers have all struggled at times. They've all got, what has traditionally, maybe it's not traditionally, but I think has been a strength of theirs over the past sort of 12 months has been, or maybe a bit longer, 18 months, has been their death bowling, with the likes of Haris Rauf. Admittedly, he got injured early on in that tri-series and didn't play much of a part. But, they really got hammered at the death. Their batters just struggled to kick on, and I think Babar is probably, if they're going to turn it around, I think Babar Azam needs to have a big tournament. I mean, in that final, he got his 6,000th run, and they talked about how he's equal fastest, for the same as Hashim Amla, who, again, when you do lists, Hashim Amla is someone that I don't immediately think of as the greatest white ball batter in the world. But he's got some of those records in terms of fastest to this, fastest to that. And his record is really, really remarkable. But Babar Azam is, tied with that for fastest ever to 6,000 ODI runs. It seems to be his best format. But, I went back and looked, because it seems like he just gets a start. And I went back and looked. His last scores, 29, 23, 10, 52, 73, 28, 23, 15, 37. like you actually can't, at some point, if you can, you need to go on and score 100. And I think it's going to be huge in this tournament that, you can't just get 50 and get out. That's not going to be a useful contribution on a flat wicket where you need to build runs, build wickets in hand, and really go at the death. And they're just going to have to be better than that if they want to go deep in this tournament.
I mean, ordinarily, I would, you talk about home advantage for teams and, familiarity. We were talking about, India being based in a particular same hotel. And I think, those are kind of the one percenters, that familiarity, you're not traveling, you get used to the same bed and you used to, that can contribute. And I think normally we would talk about home advantage in tournaments and therefore that should support Pakistan. But actually, I think for a team like Pakistan, sometimes playing at home is a disadvantage because I think of kind of like the familiarity, the pressure, the expectation. Sometimes they're better off getting outside of their own backyard because it kind of frees them up a little bit. So I think, that first game is going to be really, really important in terms of maybe the momentum that they can get. If they get off to a flyer and if they really put in a performance in that, that they potentially become outsiders because then we know they can get on these rolls. They can do this, but those roles can either go one of two ways very quickly. I always think with Pakistan, when they're on it, they're really, really difficult to play against. But when they're not, they're very easy to play against because it kind of capitulates quite quickly, very quickly. So, yeah, I think watch this space a little bit. That first couple of hours in that first game probably tell us quite a little bit about where they're going to end up, I think.
Go ahead, Binksy.
Yeah, just a really, really quick point, and I'll promise it will be quick. Less about this tournament and more just around probably the thing that has frustrated me a little bit about Pakistan is you've got Shaheen Shah Afridi, you've got Naseem Shah, you've got to an extent Haris Rauf, and then they've had a spinner in Abraham had burst onto the scene. We talk about big trios of seam attacks across the world, and none less than the one we mentioned at the top of the show in Hazlewood, Cummins and Starc. They've got the cattle, and they've got guys that are Shaheen Shah Afridi 24 and Naseem Shah coming up to 22 years old, and they've been around for a while. You just keep thinking at some point they are going to be mentioned in those in that one breath and be a world-class bowling attack across 3 formats, and they've never quite got it together. And it's just really frustrating to watch because I think you could be talking about them like Waqar and Wasim, and if they could just kind of piece together this consistency in that team, and then particularly when they've got 2 or 3 guys with the bat as well, Babar Azami you've spoken about, and Mohammad Rizwan to an extent, and Syed Shakil, they've got what looks like a fantastic nucleus. But yeah, not really piecing it together, I think, in terms of that form in world events. There you go.
Yeah, they've got all the names. I love the look of the squad. It's got all the names that you want to see in that Pakistan team. They're missing Sam Ayub,
that's a big loss.
It's a bigger loss than you think because he's their highest run scorer in the last 12 months. I just saw that on Cricinfo as I was browsing the squad.
And it mucks up the batting lineup because it's meant Babar's gone up to open. It's it's meant there's now sort of a who bats 7 kind of scenario.
That's the question, isn't it? And in that tournament against New Zealand and South Africa, they had Tahir and they had, I think, Kushtil Shah in that 6-7 position. I think if there's anything in that Pakistan squad that we've seen as a little bit of a weakness, it's those finishing roles for Pakistan. And in years gone past, we've had the Shahid Afridis, you've had explosive guys all up and down the order for Pakistan. So if they're going to go well in this tournament, that's the area I think that they're going to need to nail some kind of left field contributions from. Look, you could tell me that this team goes and plays in the final, or you could tell me that this team doesn't come out of the group. And I think those are equally likely. It's like 51-49 that I think that they play in the final or don't come out of the group at all. You know what I mean? So we know it's a mercurial side. I think the pressure and expectation is going to be massive on them in this tournament, almost as much pressure person for person as India face, fan for fan as India face when they're playing at home. So it's all to play for Pakistan. And you say the first hour of the first game will tell us, I think, what we're going to see from them as this tournament progresses.
I hope in that first hour we see Fakhar Zaman get out because he gives me nightmares. As badly as Pakistan have been playing in recent times, that guy just seems to love batting against New Zealand. And if we could get him out cheaply, that will make me feel a lot better and ease my nerves.
We'll try our very best, Stu. Right. Let's move on to the final bracket, which we've kind of got ranked as the outsiders, I think. And there's a big discrepancy in the betting between these two teams as well as outsiders. So Afghanistan, $17 and Bangladesh paying over $100 at the moment at the bookmakers. I guess the thing that stands out just looking at those betting odds is how far Afghanistan have probably come over the course of the last 3 or 4 years in white ball cricket. And you talked a little bit about their opening combination, which went really well, didn't it? Leading into that T20 World Cup in the USA and the West Indies, and Gabaz in particular, I think, has been sensational over the course of the franchise circuit in the last 18 months or so. But yeah, any hope for these two teams?
I think they've got a puncher's chance, Afghanistan, to get out of the group. I think if either, or it doesn't really take much for any of those sides, Australia, England, or South Africa, to not take Afghanistan seriously enough and for them to slip up. I think it's less likely to happen than it was in the T20 World Cup, because in a 50-over tournament or in a 50-over game, there are 300 events, right, per side. There are 600 events in total that you've got to kind of win to win the game. Whereas, in a T20 game, there's only 240 events. It's a lot shorter, and individual bursts of excellence can win you a game in T20. And that's what we saw from the openers in Afghanistan in that T20 World Cup. I think it's a much more of an 11-man game, ODI cricket, than T20 cricket is. And I think Afghanistan have a little bit more of a drop-off from their best players to their 9th, 10th and 11th best players than England do or South Africa do. So they are extraordinarily dangerous, Afghanistan. You have a look at their best bowlers and their best batters, Noor Ahmed, Faruqi, etc. Rashid Khan's in the all-rounder spot. You've got Nabi in there as well. There are dangerous players, but all 11 guys are going to have to stand up and be counted over the course of this tournament if they're to get out of the group stage. But I actually think Afghanistan will in some way decide the standings for the group, because I can see them winning a game. I just don't know who that's going to be against. And I think that game against Afghanistan will decide the fortunes of Australia, England, or South Africa, whether or not they get out of this group stage in this T20, in this Champions Trophy tournament.
I'd almost feel better about their batting lineup, weirdly, in ODI cricket if Gurbats and Ibrahim were 3 and 4 or 4 and 5. Mm-hmm. It's that just because of all the things that you've just said, the drop off, that middle order really worries me, I suppose, is what I'm getting to, because
good players, but there's a drop off there, right?
Yeah, definitely, and more. Look, I love Omatsai. I think he's a fantastic player. You've got Nabi, you've got Gulbadine. We will see if he falls over in this tournament and how he manages his antics. I'd love to see him attempt that again from the T20 World Cup. But they've got a really nice nucleus, as Binksy said. They've earned the right to be, I think, well ahead of Bangladesh in terms of puncher's chance and all of that kind of thing, whatever sort of things you want to throw out there. I think they could very well, make it into the semi-finals. I think they're a decent, good side. It's just that, that they have, when you were analysing, where are their weaknesses, I think that middle order is the concern. And the way I have framed things in my head, I think your middle order is going to be very important in terms of how you actually construct a score. And so if those two openers, you can't get a quick 70 and change a game in the way that you might need to. You actually might need to get 140 or something. And whether those two are good enough to do that, I think they're certainly good enough to go ahead and have a 250 run opening partnership and make that happen. But it's a lot trickier than it might have been in a T20 game.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I would say about Afghanistan and look, less so with Bangladesh, because I think they really are the rank outsiders, is that over the course of probably the last 5 years, if you look at the nations that have been coming up, they actually play a little bit more ODI cricket than some of the more established nation. So notwithstanding the fact that, yes, I agree, there's not that depth in that middle order. And if it was a club side, you'd be asking one of the batters to maybe, drop down to 5 or 6 and shore it up and back with the youngsters at the end. I think that they at least have some miles in the tank in terms of the amount of ODI cricket, the associate nations as they were played, and obviously Afghanistan have transversed that now. But I think that's a factor. They have got some of that muscle memory in there, but yeah, it's going to need to go completely right for them in probably 3 games, isn't it, for them to be a chance to get out of that group stage. But you wouldn't bet against it, I don't think. You wouldn't bet against them creating an upset. Let's move quickly on to Bangladesh before we get to predictions, and also that the lights and our internet connections all turn off due to our excessive use of broadband. But Bangladesh, 100-1 feels about right. Maybe 1,000-1 would be better.
I mean, it's harsh, but New Zealand's going to have to play them. I might have egg on my face, but they do on paper look definitely the weakest of the 8 sides that are named. I think they everything points to them. You talked about it being a tournament too early for England. I think it's maybe a couple of tournaments too early for Bangladesh. They've lost a bit of experience in recent times, even though you still do see the likes of Mustafiza, Mahmudullah, Mustafiza, Rahim, Tuscan Ahmed. There's that core that's been there for a long time, and we are seeing. I really love the look of Naheed, who's coming through, pace bowler. It's a shame they've lost sort of. It's a shame that someone like Shanto and someone like Hridoy, just you can see the talent is there, but it's not translating into results for those guys. They can't find a consistent level of performance. And so, maybe Shanto seems like a really good leader. If I look back to when New Zealand went there for a test series in one of his early sort of captaincy reigns, he looks like someone who's kind of fizzed up about the job and excited to be doing it. But yeah, there's just a lot of sort of things an incredible amount of things would have to come together, I think, for them to really challenge in this tournament. Although, any of these 8 teams can beat each other on the day, I think it's going to be very tricky for them to win enough games to go on and win this tournament.
Right. Let's do some predictions. Should we start with the players and then we'll finish with, obviously, naming India as the champions? But yeah, leading run scorer and leading wicket taker.
I'll take Shubman Gill if no one else has got Shubman Gill. I think he's going to be the leading run scorer in the tournament, mostly because I think India are going to play 5 games. So that gives him 5 bats at the top of the order, and I think he's a class player. And even if he only had 3 or 4 bats, I think he could still go on and score multiple big scores and be the leading run scorer. So there you go. Shubman Gill's my bet.
It's Klaasen for me. I think South Africa's going to cause some real problems in this tournament. I think Klaasen's just such a fantastic player. He's kind of got all the different gears that you need in ODI cricket. Yeah, it's him for me with the bat.
I'm going Sharma. I just think he's probably hitting form. Familiarity playing three group games, in a fairly consistent environment, just enables him to sort of kick on. I think he'll play 5 matches as well, so I've kind of got him as my leading run scorer. Right, we're doing this as I think it's called a snake draft. I'm going first with the bowlers because all my picks have gone. So I've got Shubman Gill as well, and then I got Rohit Sharma was my second pick for batter. I don't think can look past Shubman Gill's form over the course of the last 3 games against England. Albeit against England losing 7-1, but fantastic, and I think has done really, really well. And then Rohit Sharma, as Jamie said, hitting form just at the right time, and I think this potentially could be his last ICC tournament as well. So I think he'd like to go out with a bang. Bowlers. So I'm going to go first. Sorry, I'm not going last and having you pick all my picks again. I think Ravi Jadeja. I think he bowls in the overs where you've got the ability to kind of get some wickets. I think his recent form suggests that as well. I probably got Axar in there, but he's probably just more of a
yeah, not a holding bowler because that's harsh on him, but yeah, I think Ravi Jadeja is my pick for leading wicket taker again because he'll play in all of the games, including the winning final.
I'll pass because he's picked both of mine. So I had the Jada and Axar. So yeah, got nothing to contribute.
I mean, unfortunately, unfortunately for in terms of diversity, I'm still going to pick India, but I actually think it's going to be Arshdeep, and I think he's going to pick up wickets early on, and then he's going to pick up wickets at the death. I think they're obviously going to miss Bumrah, but I think that Arshdeep's going to be able to kind of step into those two roles and do those two roles very, very well, and that'll lead to him picking up a lot of wickets.
Yeah, I've got the challenge I've got with a lot of those very strong sides, India, South Africa in particular, is that their bowlers are going to take wickets off of each other a lot. So I actually went with Adam Zampa to be the leading wicket taker in the tournament because he is actually going to be the most important bowler for Australia. And I think there are going to be lots of wickets on offer for him to take because I just don't see potentially where a lot of the wickets are going to come from the rest of their bowling attack. So I think he'll finish with 11 or 12 wickets across the tournament if Australia make the semi-final.
And still be the second best leg spinner.
And he'll still be the second best leg spinner in the tournament behind Adil Rashid.
Right, guys, speak now or forever hold your peace because we might need to change the way that we do this last segment. If anyone's not got India to win it, please just raise your hand quickly. Okay.
And
cool.
anyone who's listening on the audio format, no hands went up.
Very good, Stu. Thanks for thinking about our accessibility at that vital point. Right, let's do runners up then. So we've all got India to win it, which is no surprise from the commentary throughout the course of the podcast. Who is going to earn the right to get shellacked by them in the final?
Baldy's looking at me. So look, I'm going to go New Zealand. I think we can do this. They're playing really well. The third seamer is probably the question mark. Lockie Ferguson's got to play against Afghanistan. We've got a warm-up game. It might be going on about now or, in the early hours of this morning. He's got to get through that, which, if he doesn't get through that, there's big question marks about whether it's Nathan Smith, whether it's Jacob Duffy, who it is. But if everything has come, what I'm seeing, they're performing really, really well, and they can match anyone at the moment. So I'm going to go New Zealand. Be confident.
I have South Africa to win their group and avoid a semi-final with India and then play India in the final.
South Africa as well. I hadn't thought of it as much as Baldy had, but I kind of go in a bit of a dark horse, and I think, potential for them to hit form. Got some really quality players, so runner-up.
Excellent. I'd got the same and for the same reasons as Baldy, but my second pick would be the romance final, which would be India, Pakistan, which I think the fans would love, love to see. But for me, it's probably India, South Africa in that final. If you look at the permutations. Right, boys, we've got to the end of another hour, 12 minutes of the Top Order podcast. Let's see these predictions unravel with unfailing accuracy over the course of the next couple of weeks. Tournament, as Baldy said, kicks off, I think, on the 19th of Feb, and then, concludes in early March. We will be with you throughout the course of the tournament, of course, to wrap up, particularly the games featuring our beloved nations during the course of the tournament. But for now, it is good night and God bless from us all here on the Top Order podcast, and we'll see you soon. Good night.